Hi,
Greetings from
everybody.
Egypt.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Our very jet lagged self is sending greetings from Egypt. I'm Christos,
Foster.
and this is our Egypt edition. We started 2022 with an Egypt tour, which, in our opinion, was great. And now we're ending the year with a Egypt tour. Which we were just discussing it with a tour guide, and we're expecting great things as usual because we're not a normal tour group, and usually when we do tours, we don't do touristy stuff to a certain extent, of course. Of course, you have to see the pyramids. We are literally across from them, but we approach them very different. So we are in Egypt,
In Giza.
in Giza at the moment, and Egypt for us has individually very important significance, like for so many, without drifting too much into the New Age idea of it. It is a fundamental place of intelligence, of spiritual intelligence, and of a fundamental philosophy of how to approach life, isn't it?
A
Foster?
deeper Hermetic philosophy.
Definitely.
And ethics.
There's a lot definitely that comes from Egypt, and also that was, for me, of course, or for us, and I must speak more for myself, for me, Egypt, of course, is the aftermath of Atlantis. I do believe in Atlantis. I do believe that there was something much more earlier, because now we have also evidence that so many archaeological sites can be carbon dated, for example, and new carbon dates always push dates further back and further back. It's just that archaeology doesn't like to correct its own
So for
numbers
us,
sometimes.
Egypt is much older.
Of
For
course.
instance, when they find water prints on the Sphinx, as John Anthony West found, we know that Egypt for us begins really with Atlantis as a colony. And the first beginning of Egypt, when they were creating from the indigenous culture here, the idea of Atlantis superimposed on the landscape, they brought Atlanteans to first head the beginning of Egypt, and you had 12 different pharaohs at the beginning in a circle. And then comes the birth of the different dynasties after that. After they have established a teaching, after they have integrated a whole new way of thinking, and the animals here and the indigenous land and how it represented through Atlantis to the proper time period that they were in. They modernized Atlantis for Egypt.
Right.
And they changed it.
And
And it was very fertile, the Nile Valley. It was an excellent place to grow.
Right.
And then you have a great teacher here, Thoth. And you have other great
Well,
teachers
you have a
from
great
Atlantis.
philosophy. You have a great philosophy here, which coincides to be a very similar philosophy, or is a figure of universal philosophic knowledge. Like we find this in Africa, we find this in South America, we find this in so many indigenous. We call them primitive cultures, but they're not that primitive people. Stop saying that. They are actually holders of ancient secret knowledge, which is not that secret anymore. I mean, you cannot come to Egypt and talk about secrets. The pyramid is right there. The Sphinx is right there. The temples are right there. There's no big secret here. It's pretty much in front of you. But the idea is, I think, that we should come to terms with the understanding that just because classic archaeology, they do what they've studied. They date certain things that it can't pass that. So too many discoveries have happened for the last 100 years. A lot now, very much with technology, where numbers don't match up anymore with dynasties don't match up anymore with timelines don't match up with whatever geologic occurrences, you see. So when Anthony West talked about decades ago about water erosion around the Sphinx, people said, well, it was raining a lot. I mean, come on, you know what I mean? Even the layman understands it was underwater. This can only happen when something is submerged. So the idea is, of course, that the Sphinx is older than the pyramids. And for me, by the way, the Sphinx and Newgrange in Ireland, which predate the pyramids, they have a connection together. Because also, when we look at the philosophic and also the magical system in ancient Egypt, it was all geared towards death and who you're going to be after that. Life was not, it was important, but it was not as important as what comes after it. So the passing through the veil was a very big subject here. But if we go back to the beginning, of course, or to our understanding of beginning and our research, I did past life regressions 30 years ago, and I had people who came for hypnosis to lose some weight, and they slipped into past life experiences without me even trying, but it happened. And independently, these people were able to tap into the ability to speak Egyptian, to give details about how they built and constructed and pyramids and temples and deeper meanings, for example. And these are people who came to me because they wanted to stop smoking, or lose weight, and suddenly they are here in a complete different timeline and explain everything. And they explain a lot. Individually, a lot came out. We are the descendants of an older tradition or an older civilization, of course. And little by little, we all can agree that there must have been something else here before. There's just too many coincidences.
Well, there was the Sahara civilization before that also left before we have ancient Egypt.
And
buried in the sand.
And I remember that what came up a lot about the construction of temples and pyramids. They said always independently in these trance states, they said we harness the speed of light and the speed of sound, and we create anti-gravity. So what is much more important is the conversations and the dialogues and the contents we find in Egyptian mythology is not a simple one. It's actually quite a scientific one, is a philosophic one. The questions and answers are quite advanced. Okay, so to speak of an ancient civilization that pushed the stones back and forth and up the ramp, with 20,000 Hebrews, no, it's just not. It's just not. Egypt is still holding a big source, or a big memory, if you want, of our original source.
And of ancient technologies, especially of how these pyramids were built. Also, Egypt had, first of all, they had prophets, they had scribes, and they had a very large amount of temple sleep or astral travel. And there were specific gates that you have to know the words for to enter into the Egyptian heavens. And to truly enter into these Egyptian heavens and to transcend death and to live an infinite life, or to become a god or live with the gods and goddesses. This was certainly one of the main goals also of Egypt.
Right.
Was to transcend yourself, was to understand these gods and goddesses that also were our origins, especially Osiris. When you go to the Assyrian, the main temple of Osiris, you will realize that not only did people go there, but lots of other different races came to honor Osiris, to know Isis, and that story, which lasted 4,000 years and much longer, is one of the origin stories of the human race, certainly of the civilization.
Yeah.
And we told those stories for many years. We know that many people worked with, Lower Egypt, which was connected to the snake, and the snake goddess was the image, Watchet, of Lower Egypt. And then you had Upper Egypt, which was the Nekbet, which was this incredible goddess, is about the vulture and what a great mother she is. So here we have a matriarchy, an understanding of the feminine goddess, both of Upper and Lower Egypt. And when you put the vulture and the snake together, you have all of Egypt. And along the Nile, which is in essence our own spinal column and cerebral spinal fluid, you're moving from the lower chakras all the way up to the very highest chakras when you get to Heliopolis in Upper Egypt. And of course, you also have the Nile flowing upward, just like Kundalini. And of course, the snake is the base of the Kundalini in Lower Egypt, and it rises up like a vulture mother, protecting our own evolution and our own. This is all the great symbology of Egypt and how they use the animals that lived here.
Well, it's important to, from a Hermetic point, and that's what I studied for since I'm 10, in Hermetic and in the Western traditions, especially the Egyptian mythology and the Egyptian symbology became a fundamental source upon which we created our rituals on. If you look at something very traditional like the Golden Dawn, they literally replicated an idea, not one-to-one, but an idea of Egyptian
Ritual.
authorities, for example. So the idea is, of course, here that if we look at the earliest, like Foster says, the earliest definition of the feminine principle here, it is pre-Abrahamic. It's before Abraham, and so the feminine has a really strong position here, basically. As a divine influence. You have goddesses which are equally as powerful as the male gods, for example. But again, from a Hermetic point, we don't look at these. We don't look at this as literally two people on legs or physical. There are identities and qualities of human evolution. To become like Isis, to become like Ra, to become like Thoth. So a great deal of Egyptian initiation was about becoming and transforming. And initially your death and who you become after, because you're being measured and you're being weighted and reevaluated at the moment of your death, you present yourself and your soul to the afterlife, and the afterlife says, this is how close you came to become this identity. So it has a lot to do with alchemy. And a lot of alchemy, I know people think alchemy is the chemical condition, the stones and the stuff. It's not necessarily. Alchemy is becoming the closest thing to that divine identity. Layer for layer, what became later Kabbalah, for example, is purely Egyptian in nature, and not even that, because it existed already. It is mentioned 500 years before Akhenaten, for example, as a complete system. And we find, we saw this symbol of the Tree of Life, which is a very, very famous symbol, engraved in a piece of rock in the, where is it, where we went, we couldn't go down the last time. It's the Temple of Osiris, can it be? Yes. And there you find it in a very unassuming place, but there it's engraved. So Egypt for me is a place of becoming, of initiation, of transforming, of trying to reach a certain level of initiation. But I always also say, and we experienced it, it will bring out your true self. The running joke was last time, let's see how many divorces will happen from our tour, because we are in a place of sacred geometry. Egypt and certain places in Egypt are portals. And that's why also they built, in my opinion, they built the pyramids, and the Sphinx especially is a portal of knowledge. And it is the idea to visit these places. I think you can't be just a tourist and come to Egypt. I mean, we see them a lot here. But no one is not touched by something, is not mesmerized, moved in some degree. And I think that coming to places like these places, even if it's not with a spiritual mindset, it will reawaken your so-called third eye. Your cell memory will kick in. And it's impossible to come to Egypt and be the same person when you go back home. And if you approach it the way we do it with our tours, we're guiding and we're leading in a certain way to experiences, and everything makes sense the way we go and the way we travel. It is a form of initiation. So very much the journey of the Tree of Life, that is the basis of my Kabbalistic work, for example, is nothing but a journey through the various portal points of Egypt. And the trick is to know where to start and where to end. And a very similar concept, for example, is the search for the Holy Grail. You know, and people think the Holy Grail is this diamond encrusted, multi-metallic, God knows what. It probably is the most unassuming, wooden cup you can imagine. You see, so you have to know, and you have to be guided through the places of initiation, and in those places to know exactly where the mystical portal is. And this is what Newgrange is, for example, or certain places like Glastonbury, Stonehenge, right? When the building is constructed in such a way that at an equinox, the sunlight hits through that one little
Like
hole,
in
basically.
Luxor, yes.
Like in Luxor. These are portal places. These are dimensional portal places where time is irrelevant and only space and light meet, literally. And so whatever you bring in that is being rearranged. I think that's what these places do a lot. They rearrange you. To some degree, they correct you. And very often, an inner conflict or a nervous breakdown, sometimes, we had those too.
People who die while
amplified.
giving a tour in Egypt.
Yeah, right.
And they die inside the pyramids.
Of course.
Now, there's many things we can say here because Egypt is a vast, vast study. Saqqara has its own study. Each temple has their own, particular priestesses, scribes, prophets, and astral travel. Certainly Dendera is one of your favorite temples.
It's my favorite.
For temple sleep, for the ability to astral travel.
Because I remember it.
And there is a point in the ceiling where you can leave,
Absolutely.
and you're lying down.
Yeah. Dendera is when I went to Dendera the first time, I knew exactly how to get up there, where to turn, and what's in that room.
And there's a full astrology on the ceiling.
It's the original astrology is on the ceiling, where the goddess kicks in or starts the spiral of our chart with Cancer.
Yes.
And
so it's much older.
It's much, much older, but also it is the goddess which starts astrology. It's the female principle. So, but it is interesting enough on the ceiling. In other words, you have to stand underneath it. And so everything where you stand underneath is a portal place. Portals are usually symbols that are above you in a specific form, or they are also columns in a specific form. 2 columns, 4 columns, pathways, for example. That's why in rituals we find very often the column idea, like in the
columns of light.
Column of lights and
DNA columns.
Exactly. So you find that a lot. And the symbolism is taken from the Egyptian symbolism and the Egyptian aesthetic. It's just replicated. But to me, it guides much, much earlier into Atlantis, simply because I have memories of Atlantis. I did past life regressions with other people. I guided them through their own experiences, and for almost 5-6 years, I collected their experiences, and they all came out the same way. The same way. There are 3 tribes in Atlantis, which are the healers, or the spiritual people, we would say,
the
scientists and the politicians. And at some point, there is spirit among us. In other words, there are beings among us which are enlightened. We can call them the descendants of the Nephilim, right? And I am convinced that spiritual people today are the descendants of Nephilim.
And that's what gets awakened in Egypt. The Nephilim quality in your blood.
It gets awakened. Something gets awakened, especially in places of power like those. There are many more, by the way. We're going to Japan next year, by the way, and people will say, why Japan? Because Japan has a lot of these doorways, by the way, active doorways. They're amazing there. So the idea is that these tribes, especially the spiritual tribe, realized at some point people developed now out of their greed, and the politicians and the scientists,
work together, yes.
And decided we don't need gods anymore. We don't need divine guidance anymore. You don't need laws anymore. We need nothing. We are our own gods. And it went to crap, basically. So the memory that I have so strong, and it got repeated in so many past life regressions, literally all over the world that I did. It was that the healer tribe, the spiritual tribe, said we have to save the secret keepers. the secret keepers were children.
And they had implanted in their heads
Crystals.
the crystals,
You know,
which
that's-
created
that's-
the elongated skull.
That's the idea. But again, let's not go into the alien nature of it, because it's.
No.
I'm sure somebody will say, "Well, it's the aliens." It's not the aliens. We have to give our evolution much more credit from a spiritual point. And first of all, it's really almost impossible at the moment to cross the vastness of the universe, even if you are an advanced civilization. So forget that. But again, we are in a much more multidimensional experience right here. So those aliens are not that far away, by the way. They're coming through our time-space continuum, if you want. That's easier to understand. But in those times, the people said, we have to save these children.
And we have to save the knowledge of Atlantis.
And the
so they
knowledge
put them
of
into
Atlantis.
the children.
And so these kids had to be saved. Some went to Peru, some went to Greece, some went to
Bolivia,
Egypt, Bolivia,
some went to Mexico.
and so on. That's why we find so many similarities and so many similar aspects of knowledge popping up all over the world. Now we say without
they were
any
schools.
form
They were whole
of
schools.
connection, without any form of connection. But there was one connection. There was a central place where we shared these principles, and by dispersing, we maintained, basically as a race, we maintained these principles.
Well,
we
look,
just call them different.
Atlantis went down 20 minutes before the hour. 60 million people died. Again, 20 minutes after the hour, we have a complete deluge. The crust of the earth certainly went through a cracking, and it brought upon the ice age, it brought upon huge tidal waves, and they had to save these children. Now, they took them on boats, they took them on airships that they had at that time.
Technology existed,
And
for sure.
they preserved these children, but most of them did not survive.
Yeah.
And the ones that did survive, that's the basis of the next temples.
Right.
That's the basis of the schools.
Right.
And these schools of great learning, of ancient knowledge, were everywhere. They're in Peru, they were in Mexico, they're
We
in
have-
Greece, they are
that's
in
what we're
Egypt
saying.
especially.
There are so many similarities in the way the gods are described, in the way certain
Temples are built.
I mean,
The sacred
pyramids
geometry
exist
they
all over
taught.
the world, by the
Yes.
way. You know, it's not just here.
And
They
the main
exist in many
teachers
ways.
certainly were in Egypt, and then they went to Mexico, and then they went further to Peru.
Right.
So, Bolivia. So we understand that when they were here, you know, supposedly they brought the emerald tablets from Atlantis, they brought many, many things that they wrote. Certainly there were a great deal of writings. We have Hermes Trismegistus, you know, the 3 different incarnations of Hermes as a great teacher. You have Thoth.
And we don't mean the modern version of it, because that is just an author who clumped it together. We really mean that the original idea of a substance that was a teaching in itself, which, in my opinion, served as a recipe, if you want, to complete transformation, to literally divine transformation. We have to really stop the idea that certain names and titles and ideas are people, like, you know, physical people. That's where people get off. Okay, they are qualities. They are supreme intelligence. They are supreme divine elements. But they are vastness. You see, they're not just clumped together in a body, and that's how it's described. So it's not that. Don't misunderstand this. It is. We call them inner kingdoms, and there are realms where you can enter, you can astral travel them, and you meet the divine principle, the supreme divine principle of that realm, and that is Thoth, for example. You know, much later we find, and just to add this, what Foster said, these children or these survivors of Atlantis, they are the first diluted knowledge. You see, they are the first who have a diluted experience.
And many of those people are reincarnated now. So
Well,
they have to remember on
you know,
some level.
Again, I think there's more who reincarnate. It's not like selected people. I think that it's a whole DNA strain which kind of manifested in the last
Intermarriage
50,
and-
60 years.
Yes.
You see, everybody who's kind of connected to and almost obsessed sometimes in discovering the secrets, so discovering. Well, all these discoveries are just memories in the end of the day, you see. But I think without And I'm convinced that without the inner work and the inner transformative work that is at the base of all this knowledge, it's all just very speculative and very, again, very alien, right? The aliens came and showed us, and the aliens came and did us. Do we come from this planet? No. Are we, do we have to wait for somebody on a spaceship to come? No. But was this planet visited? Yes, of course. There are too many similarities now all over the world about visitation. And we went to a very special place in Egypt. We're going to go again with this group where you see a relief where basically you see very famous light bulbs, basically, or you see the foundation of electricity, and you see these alien beings, if you want. Yeah,
they look reptilian.
They look reptilian, exactly. But again, they're just
other races that exist here,
right?
Especially in the inner Earth. Especially in the inner Earth. And then also we talk about that the tops of the pyramids, though they don't have capstones anymore, are where the real power comes in, where the real vortex opens.
Absolutely.
And that even the sarcophagus inside of the Great Pyramid should be at the center, and they moved it, because the real initiation is at the center.
Well, it's not a sarcophagus.
Right.
First of all, if you go there, it's not a sarcophagus. Stop lying in there, okay? You're not supposed to go in there. For me, it is a black mirror. You just need to fill it with water, and you have a black surface. A black mirror is, of course, a scrying device, first of all. It's like a crystal ball, right? It is a scrying device, but also it is an entrance and exit point for astral travel. So for me, especially the Queen's Chamber, the last time it was closed, so maybe it's open, there's nothing in there, but for me, the Queen's Chamber feeds that sarcophagus, as they call it, that black basin, basically. And I think that the energy from underneath feeds it as an astral doorway. I think it's a real stargate is that room.
Even before they built the pyramid, there was a well underneath, and this is an ancient well, and they made a passageway in the well, which is a kind of initiation where every initiation in Egypt is to face your own fears. Whether you're in a temple of Sobek and you have to swim underwater with crocodiles,
and not be eaten.
And not be eaten and get to the other side.
Right.
You must face your fears, and you must be able to also have the discipline to map out the journey that you're going on without fear, and to reach the goals.
It's definitely a religion, and it's definitely a religion of faith. Because if you don't have absolute faith and absolute trust in your process, you're going to be eaten. You're going to be judged. You're going to be questioned on all levels, basically. So again, a lot of what we call now Christianity, a lot of what we call Judaism, by the way, comes from Egypt.
Absolutely.
Okay, comes from Egypt. The tree of life is not Jewish or Hebrew or Kabbalistic. And by the way, there is no Kabbalistic book. Stop saying that. People say, how can I learn Kabbalah? You learn Kabbalah
through the Zohar.
Through the Zohar. You start with volume 1 and work yourself to, hopefully, through the whole volumes. This is what Kabbalah means, is to study the writing and be studied by the writing. When you come to Egypt, the writing is literally around you. You see, because you're saying the top of the pyramid. The top of the pyramid, by the way, there's no capstone anymore, but the floor or the ground of the top of the pyramid is inscribed with hieroglyphs. And to this day, I don't know if anybody made it up there. They don't let you anymore up there, but what is the writing up there? So I think that a fundamental story is written on top of that pyramid.
And also we know the Hall of Records is inside of the Sphinx, underneath the paw. We know that opens from behind the ear of the Sphinx. We know that they have entered it already.
I mean, this is even something that Edgar Cayce in his trance talks about, you see. And there's many more mediums who said there is something underneath. Of course, fast forward a couple of years, decades later, we have now sonar technology, which is super advanced. And now they go to these places and they find all these, well, they didn't find, but they can see there is stuff underneath there. There is rooms underneath there. Of course there is.
And there are records, literally records, that are made of titanium that you have to play on a specific device. And the knowledge of Atlantis is recorded on the records.
Well, that's called kymetics.
And that's more
which
holographic
is,
knowledge.
Yeah, which is sound frequency that creates imagery.
And remember, each temple, the sacred geometry of each temple or a pyramid, also represents the god and the attainment of that knowledge. So the geometry of the temple is the god itself.
Right.
The proportions are the god or goddess.
So to clarify it, the gods of Egypt are alchemical qualities, and very similar to voodoo, where a fundamental process in voodoo is, of course, to be possessed by a god or be possessed by an entity. Otherwise, the whole thing failed. You see, you want to become a vessel. There is
Same as Egypt.
The same in Egypt. Of when I met Foster the first time, we started seriously working together, and we went to a Brazilian resort and did a 10-day. It was then 10-day trainings
13 days,
or 13 days. One of his practices was nettering. So I'm familiar with nettering, but I've never seen anybody doing the Egyptian version of nettering, because it is very involved. It's hours long. It needs and demands focus and, discipline. It's ugly, yes. But it's necessary to have. And it is very similar. This form of nettering is you go to each temple, and that's what we're doing also in this tour. We go to a temple. We just don't sit there and take photos only, but we ask for the energy or the identity of that place to enter your system.
The divine principle.
One of them.
And nettering is to put each divine principle in each part of your body.
Of your
like
body.
Kunum in your hands, or
Right.
Ptah in your brain skull,
Right.
or in through the breathing with Shu, Shu, or with your heart, Ma'at, Ma'at.
Right.
Or
so
making the sound.
And again, that principle we find in the Paracelsus occult anatomy. We find this also in higher hermetic. We find this in higher magical principles. When Kabbalah is written Kabbalah with a Q, not a K, and it has no reference whatsoever to Judaism or to nothing of that. Kabbalah is the way to speak in a divine form, and each letter has a certain color, a certain vibration, a certain feeling, and a certain association that we embrace, but also connect with a certain part in our body. So Kabbalah means to speak or let the body speak in a divine language. That's something that I teach, for example.
Like in Genesis.
Like in Genesis. But you have to bring discipline. Okay? I love, by the way, that you write us messages and you ask, how can I learn that? Listen, we do trainings, we do all this stuff, but you have to be, in our work, there is no shortcut. Okay, you cannot just pretend in 10 days you're going to be a master, and you cannot drug yourself through a shortcut into an experience. So if that is your thing, no judgment, not with us, individually and together. You have to show up and devote yourself to yourself, literally, if you do this kind of work.
Because it's
a divine work, but not divine in a religious form. The divine in yourself is being honored. And we are just facilitators of that knowledge to the best of our knowledge and the best of our experience, because we have experience of ourselves.
And you put the divine principles in yourself,
right.
Even on an atomic level.
Right.
To atom, to
the
amun.
atom.
Yes.
That's the idea. So again, there's a lot of technological understanding if we want to look at things from that point. That's why even in Kabbalah, they talk about the 72 names of God, and they talk of them as technology of the soul, I think. They're not far off from it, really. But the idea is that every place of significance in Egypt, like so many other places, they have a connection to a divine identity. And you are meant to ask this part of identity to come into you and to imbue you with a certain power and to infuse your spirit with a certain understanding. And so when you do this layer by layer by layer, of course, you create what we call the alchemical body. So every organ, every part of your body, every limb, every sense is being infused with
the gods and goddesses.
the gods and goddesses, so to speak.
And then you go to their temples, in addition, like you go to a Sekhmet, active Sekhmet temple, and you are doing the mantra or the end to Sekhmet, Sas, Sakem, Sahu, or various other mantras, and you're invoking Sekhmet, and it becomes part of you.
Right.
You start to feel her presence. You start to feel how incredible it is, and it begins to change you on a cellular level.
Yeah.
And you do that now with all the different organs of your body through each temple. That's our journey.
The
through
physical
Egypt.
organ and the spiritual organ.
Back to your origins.
So it cannot be just a physical experience, but I'm telling you, if you ever come to Egypt, or you did, or you plan to do it on your own or any way, and you're planning to do that, get ready. The SHIT will come up. It will. It's like a homeopathic remedy. You cannot imbue your system with dirt. It has to come out first. So it's like a homeopathic treatment. It gets worse. Everything comes up, everything comes out, and then it gets better.
And mindfulness is not just really a yogic principle. It was part of India, part of Buddhism, part of many things.
Not at all.
But it's really a part of Egypt. And to become clearly aware, or in an enlightened state, or in a magical willing, to have the will, the magical will finally strengthened, something very different than our emotions and other things, to train that is part of Egypt.
Right.
And to go into higher level mindfulness, you're aware of the outer and the inner as one. And that's quite a practice here that was done in the temples. Right. And we do various sound practices.
Forms of it, definitely.
That come from Hermes and come from the old initiations. We love to do practices of Kundalini, certainly, to at least activate Kundalini at the base of the spine and going up the body. I've had full Kundalini in my life, this life, so I like to work with Kundalini and activate it. But I'm also very, very careful because, I've had students that overdid Kundalini and then their spines ripped out of their body. So we try to do it more gently now.
But this is when people don't apply caution and they're just going full blown for the experience. I have to tell you, I've seen it all. I've seen people go nuts. Literally, very, very common sense, very grounded people. They just don't want to do the work. They want the work to be done on them. And when you say to the work, do me, then the work will do you, but you have no control over it. So it's amazing to me how many people are willing to give up control just to have an experience. And that's what I call also, no judgment, but everybody has, there is great value, I think, in substances if it is done with respect, with correctness, with...
Egypt was about moderation.
Absolutely.
They taught that. You had to have your own philosophy in Egypt. You started at 6 years old. They brought you to the temples, especially if your father or mother was a high priest or high priestess.
Or somehow connected to temples. That was your path. You were born into it, you see. Of course, it's much easier if you're 5 and you're being initiated and introduced, right? But they do this also in Tibet. In Buddhism, they take all these kids that are, considered reincarnations of certain people, and they're being placed very, very early into a place of power.
And we know there were some very bad teachers who didn't really want to help the people to graduate. They constantly held them back. So many people come to Egypt, they remember how they didn't finish their initiations because their teacher, for some reason, was jealous of the students. And that you also find.
All stories that come through.
And you have a lot of students who basically didn't want to do any of the work. They just got in there through nepotism of their parents, and they thought they don't have to really know what they're doing. And then they made a lot of a mess.
We see this especially in the hierarchy of the pharaohs, you see, because how many become suddenly pharaohs who were not meant to become? They kill each other, they murder each other, they have each other's babies, mother, father, sister on top of each other. It's quite gross. But, that is, again, we look at royalty today because it's quite prevalent in the news, and we see how they're all interconnected and they're closest family members sometimes, like cousins. To me, a little gross, but again, a very, very normal also in ancient Greece and ancient Rome to marry a sister or to marry a brother or an uncle or a cousin just to maintain power. But here we're leaving the place of spirituality. See, we're going into politics. And pharaohs were not spiritual people. They declared themselves kings, but even Napoleon wanted to be king, but I mean, he is so far away from king than anything else, right? But the idea is really, as a place of alchemical transformation, Egypt, first and foremost, is very, very effective on a truth seeker. Look at it like a pilgrimage. It's like an idea of like Compostela. In an ideal world, we would travel for a couple months by foot through these places and initiate and wait for the initiation and wait for a sign or a message. That is the idea of a pilgrimage. Now we do it with a bus and, thank God, with climate-controlled rooms, you see, and comfort. But the idea is, if you approach Egypt and a sacred place in Egypt with an intention, the intention will respond to you. If you come and just take pictures, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. People come and say, Egypt, done it, next. And that is totally fine. But if you go to Egypt with an intention of a memory or a feeling of awakening or a calling even, trust me, it is your cell memory that responds to that calling, that says you have to finish something. We come to sacred places to evaluate ourselves, to complete sometimes also certain experiences. Like Vossa said, when you had experiences in past lives and you felt incomplete or nothing was finished or something was not as you wanted it to be, then the soul can choose, not we're forced to, but can choose a physical experience where we revisit places like these, and then we kind of have almost déjà vu experiences, yes, or memories or echoes. We have a friend who moved here. She was so in tune with Egypt that she decided to move here, you see.
When I first came here, I got very sick after I had finished the tour, and I had to leave Egypt because I felt poisoned. And the minute I left the soil of Egypt, I was no longer poisoned. Another thing that we also come here for is to see the burning bush, to go to the portal that Moses was not a person, it was more of a different kind of esoteric teaching. But anyway, when you go to Mount Sinai and you climb the mountain and you go to the portal at the top, but the whole area is a portal.
Right.
And there they have a monastery, of course, of St. Catherine. St. Catherine was again a very pagan saint who broke the wheel. They tried to put her on the wheel of karma and she broke the wheel, so there's no such thing as karma. And when they tried to pluck her skin, there's no blood, there's only milk, and she's the great goddess, St. Catherine.
And let's stay with this, because it's quite interesting. We talk about these people as saints. What makes them saintful, right? If we take these events word for word, and somebody who is of Christian faith will say, yeah, that's what my Bible teaches me. It is word for word. That's exactly what happened. Then why is their skin not penetrable by wounds? Why do they not bleed and so on? Because they have infused their cells with alchemical forces, with spiritual force, with spiritual power. It means they have awakened every single cell in their system. Every cell memory has awakened, and they become whole or holistic. And that's what it means to me. And at that point, like Buddha cannot be touched anymore after he is in this complete awakening state. Mara, the god of illusion, attacks him and nothing happens, because Buddha says, you're not real. And your reality has nothing to do with my reality. So it's a quite fascinating perspective to see what makes a certain place so relevant, right? That we find saints there and so on.
Well, all faiths go there. But what is important is you go there to have a dream.
A dream.
And the dreaming, actually, even if you're staying at the base of the mountain, of the burning bush and the town that is there, the dreams are so strong. They wake you up, they jolt you up in the middle of the night. My dream, of course, first of all, was the Nephilim. There were 3 hooded figures with no faces, just kind of black, like a nothingness. and they were wearing these robes, and they were coming towards me. And then there was a fourth Nephilim, much shorter, very different face, but I couldn't quite see it. But the other three I saw very vividly, and they were coming towards me. And then after them came the light of St. Catherine. And she comes just as a being of light.
What Foster describes is something that
that's not a dream anymore, that's a vision.
Well, again, what I want to say is, when you go to a sacred place, let's call it a sacred place or a temple or a place of significance, how do we know that it's real? Your dream state, or your dreaming state as we call it, will respond to it. I think it's totally right what Foster says. These places will provide you with really intense symbolism, or intense an intensity in your dreaming, which is
vision.
A vision. It's almost
that was a vision because you're not really dreaming. You wake up
again,
in a vision.
It's really almost a place where, is it a dream? Is it not? Are you awake? Are you not? These are places that I consider portal places. You see, so it's
Something
almost
comes
impossible to speak about Egypt and not speak about stargates, right? That's where Stargate, the whole concept, comes from. But it is portals, and portals where true dimensional shifts happen. And I think, and in my experience also, that's what Foster mentions very correctly, we sense them a lot through the dream state, or if
astral travel,
or if that is your practice, through vision work or astral travel or scrying, for example. But you're going to be immersed in a much different experience of seeing or hearing. If you have anything latent in your senses, like clairaudience, it will intensify. That's what these places do. They intensify something.
Or you go to Philae, and you're going to visit Isis on her island. And before you even get there, when you wake up in the morning, you're on the boat and you start crying. And you don't know why you're crying, because Isis mourned the death of her husband. And there is, part of you becomes Isis. You start to mourn Osiris. And you end up there, with other people. We started the invocation to Isis, and people started to, sing to Isis. And then cats started to come and get on top of the altar and present themselves.
That was amazing, because
in person.
We have special permission to go to Philae by ourselves, only our group.
In the early morning,
and early in the morning, which is the best time. You see the stars, and you go on this little boat, and you go to this island, basically. And you go inside, we walked inside, and the sun, just twilight started a little bit. And we go in, it's complete darkness in this temple, and there is an altar, a stone altar in the middle. And I start to invoke the great dark mother. And out of nowhere, this cat jumps.
Well, we did an invocation first to Isis. That's when the cat jumped.
Yeah.
She comes as Isis. Here I am. In a black cat. So we felt close to her. And if you feel the emotional connection, if you've been there before, if your own understanding of Isis, everything she went through, not only, creating so much of Egypt, but also, watching her husband die, then going into the essence of magic, because, she's one of the essences of magic. Other people, it was Hathor that they felt close to in her temples, where they sing, where they dance, where they have sexuality, and they feel very free, the Hathor women and men. And then we had other goddesses. We had a more severe Sekhmet, with all her power on her throne, the lion goddess. And here we have many faces that are animals. Do you want to say anything about the animal faces?
You again, the metaphors, of course. The metaphors of instinct. It's not like the people run around with two faces. It's metaphors, it's qualities, it's instinct. It's a lot about the interpretation of an instinct. That's what it is in the end.
And also the journey with Anubis. That's quite an important journey. To understand who Anubis was, how when you die you call Anubis, and you start with Anubis to go through the gates to the Egyptian heavens. Now that's a whole different story, a whole different way of dying. And Egypt certainly prepares you for that.
Yeah. Well, we just arrived a couple of days ago, so we are. I'm completely jet lagged. I don't speak for him, but I'm completely jet lagged. So this is our attempt to bring you a little bit of the experience that we haven't even started yet. We begin tomorrow, officially the tour, and we're going to take you along, by the way, because as Foster said, there is so much we could say about, and it's impossible.
We feel it's important, though, when we invoke here, to invoke in ancient Egyptian. But sometimes you want to use Enochian, because Enochian is so close to the Atlantean language and the way Atlantis spoke. So to speak in Enochian here has a different effect.
Now explain to them what Enochian means.
Well, Enochian, if you want to go back to John Dee and explore how they brought through these angels and how, they wrote down this language that we use for Enochian ritual.
Enochian is
an
a language which can be spoken. So it's not a code.
It has a syntax.
It has a syntax, it has a grammar, it has vowels, it can be translated, but more importantly, it can be spoken. So anything that can be spoken, I studied Enochian for many, many, many years. And in...
you were in the last mystery school.
In respect of my studies, Enochian, I understood that Enochian is an Atlantean dialect, if you want, or a language, because like runes, for example, you can't speak runes.
No.
They are mythological dynamite. You can write them, you can invoke them, you can, but they're not a spoken language in that sense. Enochian, though, is a very potent, but also a language which can connect you with realms which are very
different.
Very different from where we are right now. So there's always a physiologic effect on it. And I think that is also a side effect, if not a nice one, that when you announce yourself in a specific form, as ancient as possible, I think that the system reacts. There's an action and a reaction idea here. But again, I experiment with these things, and I have wonderful results and I have great results, but there's always some kind of a confirmation of presence. I'm here, or I heard you, I've seen you. And again, one of the best experiences is, of course, to have a series of synchronicities. Then you're on track, right? And another is to have an intense dream state, where it's important to have at least a little bit an experience of lucid dreaming, which is the ability to control the dream, or you're dreaming and you can literally communicate with the dream itself. And that is something that we have also, like so many subjects, videos on. We have a video on dreaming, where Foster teaches a lot techniques of how to start to control the dream state. I think it's one of the most important techniques that you can have. It needs discipline. Sorry, it needs discipline. So we can show you the recipe, but you have to start cooking. And ultimately, we are about to embark tomorrow into a very, again, we've been through it now many times, me and Foster individually, but you cannot come here and not come with the most current self and something that you've seen a million times. You see it again. It's like a very first experience. I don't think that Egypt ever loses, or places like Egypt ever lose the magic it really has, because magic has been a fundamental practice in everyday life here.
And the Hatshepsut temple, the one female pharaoh, which is quite modern, also calls us quite a bit. And we keep learning more and more about her story, who her lover was, how she lived, the intrigue in her court. You can feel it when you're in her temple. But at the same time, you feel her. What was it like to have a female pharaoh in her power, empowered and strong, as Egypt gave tremendous rights to women. And they were allowed to divorce, and they were allowed to have their own lives, and they didn't have to marry, all that. Which we consider extremely modern.
Right.
And that we honor them for. The equality of priests, priestesses, they have matrilineal and they had patrilineal.
Yeah.
lineages.
I mean, there is a lot of modernism in there. It's like when I say to people, read Plato's Republic, you know, just to get an idea what democracy is, for example.
And then they had the
You know.
Jed Cullen. They had very
They had their
powerful
own system.
tools. Yes. They had the 4 gates to open up the Kundalini and the Jed Cullen. But more than that, they have whole temples with only paintings of Jed
The
Cullens.
most important thing is that in Egypt there is no separation. It's like India. There's no separation between mundane human life, normal life, and divine presence. It's connected. You cannot go to India and not hear a namaste, not hear a Ganesh or a Buddha or a, you cannot go to India and not be immersed in their spiritual cosmology. And that is everyday
Same
life.
here, same
Everyday life, you see. And the same here. We always have to, I always remind my people, Egyptians are not Catholics. Africans are not Catholics. They're not Christian. Okay? Greeks are not Orthodox. We are pagan. We are polytheistic.
And when you come to Egypt, you want to take off your shoes before you go into the temples, and they don't allow you.
They don't allow you.
Same thing
of
in
course.
Greece. Because you want to honor the gods. To
Right.
us, it's like a defamation to wear shoes in these temples and all this. But this is the old
Now
way.
it's too many people, you don't know what their feet are bringing in. So I'm keeping my shoes on. Don't worry about it.
But there's a reverence. The
There's a
minute you
reverence,
walk in.
you see, and the way you approach a place like this, no matter where you go, that's the way the place will speak to you.
With devotion.
So the less you want, the more you get out of it.
The devotion to the god or goddess is within you. You are becoming that principle. And that's how, when you approach that, when you enter a temple with that kind of grace, you leave very enhanced. Especially, we sing in these temples. We try to find their exact sound. And then the temple sings you. Or you start the ritual, and the ritual takes you.
Takes you off, yeah.
Whether you're using an ankh, or you're using any of the other devices that we have.
Yeah.
Or you're using the Eye of Horus to protect yourself.
There's magic in everything. But a lot of this magic found its way into our Western mysteries. What we call the Western mysteries, you see, everybody ran to India or Tibet and Buddhism to get the Eastern practice, which is perfectly fine. But we also have the equivalent, that's the Western mysteries. But the Western mysteries are very scientific, very alchemical, very universal approach to the cosmology of being.
You make your inks out of herbs. You write the ink inside of a bowl before the scrying or before you're going to do a ritual. And then you pour water into the bowl. The ink of what you have done as a spell enters into the bowl, and then you drink it.
And then you drink it, right?
This is very
But that is
Egyptian.
it, again, in modern terms, Masaru Emoto, The Message of Water. If you're not familiar with it, please Google it. And he did it in a very modern way, that we can program water or we can program liquid. But the same thing we knew about thousands of years ago. If you infuse a liquid with a spell, a word, or a breath, and you drink it, then you infuse every cellular element in your system with that spell. The quality of the spell or the prayer or the vision that you want to achieve in the body, that depends on your, guess what, discipline. You see, the more you know what you want, the better the execution will be. But if we go to places of experience, I prefer to keep things
Experiential.
empty. I introduce myself and I say, whatever needs to come to me and whatever I can give, so be it. You see, because that also demands complete trust in a place. And I tell you, you will feel certain places here in Egypt. I remember when we went the first time to the Hanging Church, which is not
That's where Christ and Mary came.
allegedly with Joseph, and
when
and
the
I
children
believe
were
they
being
did.
killed, the
But what
firstborns, they came here.
Okay, what happened was the whole way to get there, and you need to go through guards, and there's police, and there's the Christian section of Cairo, and
Where the Great Mother also showed herself, too. There was an apparition.
and you have to walk through these little streets, very narrow, And the first time I went through, I think this is one of the very few times when I felt that my brain was in a different time zone. If it wasn't for the Coca-Cola t-shirts, really you think Christ and the apostles will come around the corner. This is how intense it was. So for me, that's not a déjà vu, but it is a cell memory. It's an echo of sort. And you go to this place, this church, and there is the story, and you feel, there's no other way to say it, you feel an authenticity. You feel that something was here and something happened here. See? And it has, as Foster says, apparitions.
And left an imprint.
It has apparitions. You see? The apparitions of the Mother of God, as usual,
She
always.
appeared there.
The Mother of God or the Mother God. That's what the apparition always calls. And now we have, you can YouTube this, in modern times, people with their cell phones. Thousands of people filming, not only photograph, but filming this apparition. So why is it happening there? Because the imprint left, or the experience of the imprint left a portal.
Yes.
And the portal is open. So whatever Mary, the mother, represents here, because I think for me she's the crucial part here, whatever she does, spiritually, magically, occult, whatever she prays, whatever she's capable of creating, she creates a portal. And that can only happen through awareness. A portal is not just, 1 and 1 is 2 in some geometric form. It is awareness. You bring something, you know something, and that knowledge settled in that basement, basically, because I think it was a basement now, and there it is. It's exactly. You understand? So
that's a very fascinating place. The Hanging Church.
We tap
in Cairo.
We tap into a place which seems to be an active portal, which is not much different than the pyramids, by the way. All right? So whenever we find apparitions, by the way, there are open portals. We went to Lourdes, for example. So Lourdes for me it's quite a horrible place, I have to say, because it's completely brain manipulated, patriarchal, guilt and sin. It's like
yes.
It's like a really bad version of Disneyland.
But you found
that was my impression.
But you found one lovely church.
But it's not one lovely church. I think the only place of power for me, the only place that completely stood out and completely
was not
vibrant,
the grotto.
Was not the grotto. It was the church over it. There's a church built on top of the grotto, and it's the only church dedicated to the Mother God.
Full of gratitude on the walls.
And when you go in, there's plaque after plaque. It's covered
thank yous, with appreciations, with where people donate. I was healed here, yeah.
You go into a place of, that's the only place in Lourdes which for me has real power. The rest is money making because it's a business, and that's totally fine. But let's not bullshit each other. We know what it is, okay? You want to sell these rosaries, and that is okay for me. But if we talk about a place of real transformation, real power, it's the church over the grotto. It's not the grotto. It's the place over it. And some random priest said, that's the only church dedicated to the feminine in this whole place. All right? So if you don't go in a religious sense, meaning, or with a religious concept, you still can approach a place like this because it's dedicated to the essence of the feminine principle, which is gratitude and love and trust and healing. And that is wall-to-wall covered in donated plaques of families and people who had some experience and wanted to express their gratitude. That's a fantastic place to be. A fantastic place to be.
Egypt is a journey through yourself, through your own soul, and through your whole many bodies. So we also teach people about all the different Egyptian bodies. And so they start practicing going into, first of all, their astral body, or go understand what the Ba is and the Ka.
Right.
They go through the soul to the mental body after that. They go into yet another body after that. They go through the Hadid. They go through their shadow body. And then they go into their spiritual bodies, all the way to the Sahu, the most important bodies for the ancient Egyptians. And you enter into the body of Osiris. And you merge with Osiris. And you transform your DNA. And this is a deeper journey down into the earth to through yourself, through all your history, through all your memories, to get to the original time. And this is part of going in your different bodies to astral travel, and we teach people how to do that, how to start separating the different bodies, because that's crucial to Egypt. That's what they did here, as quite a science. So it is a ancient source of tremendous knowledge, Egypt. I was initiated into Saqqara rituals through Donald Beeman, whom I loved, and I love that whole day when we were all initiated, and all the different initiations he talked about in his own tarot, in which Saqqara changed his life, and he was a Kabbalist. So we continue all these traditions. We always go deeper and deeper when we come to Egypt, and this is, I don't know how many times we have come here, and it never fails us.
Yeah.
Would you like to say anything in conclusion?
That is the idea. There's way too much to say.
Too much to say.
This is when we are very happy when people show up to these tours, because there is no other way to explain it. You know, without becoming too explanatory, and you know, it's only a lot of words, and it's like a movie. I can explain to you the movie that I saw, or you see it yourself and you have an experience. So an experience cannot be replicated by, you know, a storytelling. You know, it can convey an idea, but the real experience, you have to really be there and drink it up. So we are starting our tour tomorrow. I don't even know if this podcast is going to make it, because internet in Egypt is very slow. But we want to thank you guys that you are sticking here with us.
Tell other people about our podcast.
Please do so.
And subscribe,
and you know, annoy them as much as you can, and share, like, subscribe, share, like, subscribe, share, like, subscribe, share, like, subscribe.
And next week we have another Egyptian episode.
Probably. God knows from where we're going to be.
In Luxor, I think. But
we are going to do, or I'm going to do, because I'm the technical part here, I'm going to do a little bit of a vlog out of the whole tour, which you can probably see best later on YouTube. So it's not going to be a audio version, but a visual tour. And if you want to see that, wish me luck that I can capture everything that I want to capture. It's going to be great. Don't worry about it.
We've slept in the Great Pyramid. We've been there always for sunrise.
We've done it. Egypt has been, at
with all the
to
children
me,
there
Egypt has been to me very good. I have to say, it's been very generous to me. The first time I came, I got more than I bargained for, I have to say. But it was almost like Egypt had a tour ready for us, and I came the first time here with 80 people. It was the most, to this day people still talk about it, how amazing it was. This is how transformative it was. We went, and we still do that. We go to a temple with our little group. We're now about 20, 22 people. We go in, the whole temple empties out. We do what we do, and when we decide that we are finished, everybody else comes in. And I mean, there's people everywhere. And even our tour guide said, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing that. You're manifesting very well. But this is also what happens naturally. We come in with an intention, and literally, we've seen it time after time. The place empties out. We're talking about buses outside, people everywhere, and say, where the hell did everybody go? But the place almost seals us. Right. And then Foster sings in these temples, you know, for a little bakshish, of course, you know, because there's always a little tipping and back and forth. But he does it. And when he finishes, when we decide to finish, we go out. Everybody came. So we scared the crap out of our tour guide sometimes, but now he knows us, so he knows what to expect. But that is the power of synchronicity.
Well, now we have smaller groups, because we're on a private boat going down the Nile, and it only has basically 10 rooms.
10 rooms.
So we can only bring, at the most, 22 people.
That's it.
But it is a beautiful boat, and it's serene to go down the Nile,
it's
to
wonderful.
Listen to the water.
To be on the Nile is a bucket list to me.
Like the voice of your ancestors. It's so beautiful.
It's
and calming.
You have to remember, these are the original waters of this planet. All the oceans, every drop on this planet is an ancient drop of water. It never left this planet, so it's here, and it contains memories, and it contains the future. really, you see, because there's a lot of...
The new Aeon.
I
yes.
always say that Egypt is about the future, because everything they built was for the future.
Horus.
You know,
and
that's
beyond.
the Horus idea. Guys, thank you so much. We love you. We sent you many blessings from Egypt. And
Join us sometime.
join us sometimes. I don't know if we're going to redo this again anytime
You never
soon.
know.
But look on our website.
We take you with us now.
Look, we take you with us, you know, where we're gonna. Look at our website, please. Have a look at our videos, because people still ask where to find them. You find them under the link on goldenhummingbird.com, and there you can download and get everything that you need. And any kind of plans, please follow our social media, especially Foster is always first to announce something, then he has to redo it because it's too quick. But that's him. So we have a couple of things planned, and
Well, this year is Egypt. We did Egypt twice.
Right.
Next year is Japan.
next year in
And
March,
we go to
it's
Greece, to
yes.
Crete. And then the year after that is Kenya, or the African
Well,
Kenya.
we're talking about Kenya. We're talking about it because, again, you know,
Hope to see you there.
we hope to see you there. We're taking you with us now from tomorrow on. So be kind to us. Give us a little time. If you don't see a podcast next Friday, it is one internet related, guaranteed. And
So this is live from our hotel room on the Giza Plateau next to the Great Pyramid.
and you don't want to see our our hotel room, but I would love to show you our view, that you also really know that we are here. You know, we're not making this up. And here we go. There's the pyramids. Bye, guys. We see
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.